A cold-hearted billionaire living alone after the death of his beloved wife adopts 3 children abandoned in the woods next to the body of their deceased mother. When they turned 13, a horrifying truth was revealed. The forest breathed with the sound of falling rain. Damp leaves carpeted the winding path, releasing a musty, earthen scent with every footstep. Mist threaded between the trunks like pale ghosts, draping the woods in a quiet, ancient sorrow. Elias Grant adjusted the collar of his coat as he approached the small wooden shack by the forest's edge. Smoke curled from its crooked chimney, and the faint glimmer of an oil lamp shimmered through the fogged window. He didn't knock. He never did. The door creaked open before his hand reached for it. "You again?" a raspy voice said with a smile. "Still here, Morton," Elias replied. The old forest warden leaned on the doorframe, a thick wool sweater clinging to his stooped shoulders. His beard was grey, with streaks of darker hair still clinging stubbornly to his chin, like remnants of another time. "It's raining again." Morton squinted at the treetops. "People tend to stay indoors when the sky weeps. You? You walk deeper into it." Elias pulled a folded scarf from his coat pocket. He held it for a breath. It was violet wool, the edges worn thin. Slowly, he looped it around his neck. "Rain makes me feel," he said, tightening the knot gently. "Reminds me that I'm not entirely made of stone." Morton didn't press further. He never did, just nodded once, stepping aside to let Elias pass if he intended to. Elias didn't speak again. He tipped his head once, a thank you, and stepped past the shack and into the trees. The forest had changed little over the years, unlike him. Every rock, every crooked root on the path felt familiar beneath his boots, but his body no longer moved with the same quiet confidence it once had. He paused now, more often, not from fatigue, but from something deeper, heavier. He reached the clearing where the trees gave way to a mossy knoll. There was an old tree there, twisted, silvered by time, where she used to sit. He ran his hand along its bark, rough and cold. "You still remember this place?" he murmured. No answer, of course. Only the soft patter of rain through leaves. He sat down, as he always did, beside the root where Violet once leaned, her fingers trailing over wildflowers, her face turned toward light, even when clouds ruled the sky. "This is your season, Vi," he whispered. "The earth smells the way you used to say heaven might." A wind stirred the branches. He closed his eyes, and then, faint, fractured, a sound. It didn't belong here. Elias froze. Breath held. The forest was never loud, but this was different. A cry. Software. Muffled. Not the cry of an animal. It came again. Desperate. Cracked at the edges. He stood quickly, his heart clenching without permission. The path beneath him turned treacherous as he moved, slick with rot and moss. Branches whipped across his coat. The sound drew him deeper until he stumbled into a narrow thicket, and there it was. A canvas tarp, discolored with mildew, sagging like a collapsed lung. Rain dripped from its edges in irregular beats. Elias stepped forward. The smell hit him first. Damp cloth, decay, and something human. He pulled the flap aside and went still. 3 small figures sat huddled against a woman's lifeless body. Maybe 2 years old. No screams, no more cries. Just wide, unblinking eyes. The oldest boy blinked first. Dirt smudged across his cheek like a bruise. The little girl beside him clutched a sodden, stuffed rabbit. The third child, barely moving, sat with his thumb pressed tightly between his lips. Elias knelt slowly, not reaching out yet, just lowering himself to their eye level. The girl shifted. "Mister?" Her voice was dry, paper-thin. "You here to take Mama home?" He didn't answer. He saw the paper tucked under the woman's folded hands. Rain had already begun to warp the ink. He slid it free and read, "I'm Clara. I ran from their father. He wanted to sell them. I ran, but I couldn't get far. If you find them, please, do what I couldn't. Please love them." Elias folded the note without a word. The children flinched when he moved toward them. He paused. Then slowly, carefully, he extended his arms. "I'm going to take you somewhere warm." The boy hesitated, then nodded once. Elias wrapped his coat around them, one by one, lifting each gently into his arms. As he stepped out into the clearing, the sky opened wider, the rain falling harder, like the forest itself was watching. Morton was still at his shack when Elias returned, soaked through, 3 small bodies bundled against his chest, like fledglings pulled from a storm. The old man stepped out, eyebrows furrowed. "Sweet Lord," he whispered, "where in God's name?" Elias shifted, tightening his grip on the smallest child who had drifted into sleep. "In a tent. The mother. She's gone." His voice cracked at the edges. "Will you see to her?" Morton nodded without hesitation. "Of course. But, Elias, what about them? I'm taking them home." "You're sure?" Morton's voice wasn't judgmental, just uncertain. "These children—" Elias looked down. The girl had tucked her face against his chest. Her tiny hand clutched his scarf. "If it were Violet," he said quietly, "she wouldn't leave them here." Morton exhaled long and slow and didn't argue further. Elias turned toward his car parked at the forest edge. The headlights cut through the mist like a promise. He opened the back seat and laid the children down as gently as one would set down a memory too precious to wake. Then he closed the door, moved to the driver's side, and started the engine. Behind him, the forest closed again. And nothing in his life would ever be quiet in the same way again. The mansion stood on the edge of the hills, quiet as a sealed tomb. The stone facade glistened with rain, light catching on ivy leaves like glass shards. Inside, every surface was polished, precise, every corner tucked into silence. Elias pushed the front door open with his shoulder, his coat still clinging to the warmth of 3 small bodies. They were asleep now, or close enough, damp and curled into themselves, like tiny creatures braving the unfamiliar world beyond the forest. A pair of soft-soled shoes clicked on the marble floor. It was Helen, the housekeeper of nearly 2 decades. She stopped dead at the threshold of the hallway, her apron speckled with flour, her face frozen in confusion. "Sir," she started, then saw the children. Good heavens. "They'll need warm towels, blankets, food." Elias didn't stop walking. One of the rooms on the east wing set it up. Helen followed, still stunned. "Sir, forgive me, but 3 children? They're staying," he said simply. He turned down the main hall toward the drawing room. His boots left faint muddy imprints on the pale flooring, something he once would have scolded the staff for. Now he didn't even look back. Helen caught up, lowering her voice as they passed the grand staircase. "Do they have names?" Elias paused. The weight in his arms shifted slightly as the girl stirred. "No," he said quietly. "Not yet." Dr. Samuel arrived within the hour, summoned from the city by a call as short and emotionless as a fire alarm. The old doctor stepped into the living room, where Elias stood beside the hearth, the children huddled under a thick blanket on the couch. Their small chests rose and fell in uneven rhythm. Elias didn't take his eyes off them as the doctor approached. "They're malnourished," Samuel said after a cursory exam. "Dehydrated. Probably haven't eaten properly in days, but no signs of infection or injury." Elias gave a small nod. Samuel lowered his voice. "Elias, I have to ask, are these your children?" Elias met his gaze evenly. They are now. Samuel exhaled through his nose. I never thought I'd see the day. I didn't either. Helen re-entered then, carrying 3 small mugs of warm milk on a tray. She set them down near the fire, her hands visibly trembling. Blankets are in the room at the end of the east wing, she said. I put out some toys from the old guest nursery. They're dusty, but... She trailed off. Sir, what should we call them? Elias looked down. The girl had woken slightly, her eyes blinking at the firelight. He stepped closer, crouching beside her. You're Theo, he said gently, to the boy who'd clutched his brother so tightly in the tent. Brave. The way you didn't let go, even in fear. He turned to the little girl, her fingers curled in the hem of his coat. You're Levi. You stayed still so he could sleep. That's kindness. Finally, he looked to the smallest boy, still curled tight in a ball, one thumb tucked near his chin. And you, Elias whispered, you're Noah. Because somehow, there's still hope. The girl blinked slowly. My name's Levi. He nodded. Does that mean I get to stay? Elias didn't answer right away. He looked toward the fireplace, where the faint reflection of a photograph gleamed above the mantel. It was Violet, her hair pinned back, her smile soft and luminous. He remembered the day it was taken, her hands resting on her belly, before the miscarriage took that hope from them. I think, he said quietly, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Later, when the children were asleep, clean, full, swaddled in warmth and softness they had never known, Elias lingered in the drawing room. The silence was different now, no longer sterile, just quiet. Helen entered softly. I didn't think I'd ever hear small feet again in this house. Elias didn't turn. Neither did I. She studied him for a moment, then her eyes flicked toward the photo of Violet. She always said this place was too big for 2 people. She wanted 5, Elias said, a ridiculous number. I told her I'd settle for 1. Helen stepped closer. You look tired. I am. She hesitated. This will change everything. Elias finally looked at her. I hope so. Helen nodded, then moved to leave. Before she stepped out, she added, that old reading room of hers, I cleaned it, dusted the windows. The lamp still works. He didn't reply, but after she left, he rose. In the hall, the air grew warmer, softer. Lamps hummed quietly. At the end of the corridor, the door to Violet's room stood ajar, the light flickering like a candle waiting to be noticed. He pushed it open. Dust lay in the corners, but the room still smelled faintly of lavender and paper. Books lined the shelves. A cardigan still hung on the back of her old chair. Elias sat down slowly in that chair, resting his hands on the arms, as if expecting them to mold into hers. He looked toward the open window, where rain tapped gently on the glass. You always wanted children, he said aloud. I couldn't give you that then, but maybe I can give them to you now. He didn't cry, but something loosened in his chest, and for the first time in years, Elias Grant closed his eyes in a room that didn't feel empty. Morning light sifted through the tall windows of the breakfast room. The storm had passed, but the world outside still dripped and sighed with moisture. A soft breeze stirred the lace curtains, carrying with it the faint scent of damp ivy and old stone. Helen moved quietly around the room, setting plates with care. Scrambled eggs, buttered toast, sliced fruit, all simple, all warm. She glanced at the heavy oak door as if expecting it to creak open on its own. It didn't. It took a small hand, then another, and then a third. The children stepped inside in a single file. Noah clung to Elias's pant leg, his face half hidden behind a sleeve that hung too long on him. Levi walked ahead with quiet, curious eyes. Theo, the eldest, paused at the threshold and simply looked at the ceiling beams, the placement of chairs, the polished brass teapot. "Good morning," Helen said softly. Levi smiled first. "Hi." Theo said nothing but nodded. Noah didn't let go of Elias. "They're not used to tables," Elias murmured as he tried to guide them toward their seats. Helen gave a patient shrug. "Neither was Sir when he first inherited this house. It took me 2 weeks to get him to eat anywhere but study." That earned her the faintest smile from Elias. Theo sat down slowly, eyeing the spoon beside his plate. He picked it up, then carefully flipped it in his palm, inspecting its curve like it might tell him something. Levi reached for a strawberry and bit into it with a happy noise. "It's sweet," she declared, then held one out toward Theo. He took it without looking at her, but nodded once. A thank you, wordless. Noah refused to sit unless Elias sat too. When Elias finally did, only then did the boy climb onto the chair beside him, legs dangling, hands tucked under his thighs. They ate in mostly silence, broken by the occasional soft clink of cutlery, or Levi humming quietly under her breath. Halfway through the meal, a grape rolled off her plate and bounced under the table. "Oh no!" she gasped. She ducked down to retrieve it, emerging victorious, holding it in the palm of her hand like treasure. Helen chuckled. "You're quick." "My mama used to say I had hummingbird hands," Levi replied, matter of fact. The table went still for a moment. Theo looked up, just for a second, his gaze flicking to Elias, then back down to his plate. Noah slid closer to Elias's side, bumping against his arm. After breakfast, Helen took them upstairs to wash and change. Elias stayed behind, standing at the window, watching the mist rise off the garden hedges. He'd expected chaos or resistance. What he hadn't expected was this quiet. It wasn't the cold kind that had haunted the house for years. It was soft, uncertain, alive. Later that afternoon, he tried, very poorly, to dress Noah. The boy squirmed as Elias struggled with the buttons on the too small shirt. "This can't be right," Elias muttered, holding the garment like it was a puzzle box. "Where does this even go?" Noah looked up at him, wide-eyed. "Is this the first time you dressed a kid?" "Yes," Elias admitted. "You're not good at it." "I noticed." Helen stepped in from the hallway, lips twitching. "Might I?" Elias stepped aside with a sigh. "Be my guest." "Button from the bottom," she said, demonstrating quickly. "Also helps if you remember the sleeves come after the arms, not before." Noah giggled, and Elias looked down at him, startled by the sound. In the late afternoon, they wandered the halls. Levi found the reading room again and slipped inside without asking. Elias followed. She was curled up in the armchair, feet not touching the floor, flipping through a picture book with faded watercolor drawings. "This room smells like someone nice," she said. Elias paused in the doorway. "She used to sit right there," he said quietly. "My wife." Her name was Violet. Levi glanced up. "Was she nice?" "She was. I think I would have liked her. I think she would have liked you too." A silence settled over them. Not awkward, just still. Elsewhere, Theo had found his way into the drawing room. Helen, passing by, noticed the boy standing on a stool, his fingers reaching towards the mantel clock. "Careful," she called. "That stool wobbles." "It's not working," Theo said without looking down. The second hand stopped. Maybe spring broke. "You like clocks?" she asked, stepping in to steady the stool. "I like things that tick right," he replied. "Ah," she said, "then you'll be very disappointed in people." He looked at her. His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes twitched, like he understood. That night, the children were tucked into a single room, beds spaced close. Levi asked for the light to stay on. Theo didn't say much. Noah held Elias's hand until he drifted off. Elias didn't leave. He stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, eyes on the slow rise and fall of blankets. He hadn't planned to stay, but something rooted him there. A whisper broke the quiet. "Are you going away?" It was Noah, not fully asleep. Elias shook his head. "No." "Promise?" "I'll be here in the morning." Noah closed his eyes. Elias stayed, until the first pale light touched the window pane. The garden stretched wide and green beneath a pale spring sky. Dew still clung to the blades of grass, sparkling like shy stars in daylight. A breeze carried the scent of pine and damp soil from the nearby woods, Elias's woods, though he never truly claimed them. He stood at the edge of the flower bed, sleeves rolled, hands in dirt. Beside him, Levi carefully placed marigold seedlings into the loosened earth, her little brow furrowed with precision. Noah crouched nearby, not digging, just watching a ladybug crawl up a twig. Theo was kneeling farther off, examining the roots of a fern like a puzzle. "You press too hard, it won't breathe," Elias said to Levi, his voice softer than it had once known how to be. She looked up. "Plants breathe? In their way. Roots need room, like lungs." She adjusted carefully. "There? Better?" He nodded. Just a few months ago, Elias Grant had been in boardrooms where silence meant power. Here, silence meant something else. Attention, connection, sometimes even peace. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Again. Inside, Helen answered the doorbell with practiced grace. A courier handed over a thick envelope and left without a word. She opened it at the kitchen counter. The header read, URGENT, Board Resolution Pending. "Sir?" she called out as Elias stepped back in, wiping his hands on a towel. "Leave it," he said without looking. Helen hesitated. "It's from Marcus." "I know." "He says the investors are threatening to call an emergency vote. They want to know if you're still fit to lead." "I'm not," Elias replied flatly. He poured water into 3 small glasses. "And I don't want to be." Helen looked at him for a long beat, then simply nodded. "I'll shred it then." "Please do." That afternoon, the children followed him into the forest for the first time. Theo walked behind, always a few steps removed, not out of defiance, but calculation, taking in angles, sounds, the shift of light. Levi held a wicker basket for collecting wildflowers. Humming. Noah stayed closest to Elias, small fingers curling into the hem of his jacket every few minutes, like he was making sure the world hadn't changed again. "This place is wild," Levi whispered, looking up at the towering trees. "It's old," Elias said, "and older things don't care what people expect of them." "Do you like it?" "I always have." "Did Mom?" Elias paused. "She did." Levi tilted her head. "Did she have friends here?" He gave her a faint smile. "She used to say the trees were the only things that truly listened." Levi nodded. "Maybe that's why you like them too." Later, they reached the edge of a small lake. Sunlight glittered on the surface, disturbed only by the occasional dragonfly or breeze. Elias sat on a fallen log while the children skipped stones, tried to, or simply watched the ripples grow and vanish. Theo came over, holding a bit of plastic wrap. "There's trash by the shore." Elias took it, folding it neatly before placing it into his backpack. "People leave things behind," Theo said. "People do," Elias replied, "but we don't have to." That evening, Helen noticed the children returning with muddy shoes and sticks in their pockets. She didn't scold, just handed them each a warm cloth and said, "That's what soap and patience are for." The next day, Elias showed them how to build a compost bin. Levi asked why food should rot. He answered by burying an apple core and showing them the one from a week before, already soft, giving itself back to the earth. Noah's nose wrinkled. "It's stinky." "It's life," Elias said, Messy and worth it. At lunch, the conversation drifted from worms to weather, then to friends. Boko Bankong? Levi asked, mouth half full of mashed potato. Elias chuckled. Bo tung ko mot ngoi ban, ko I thich kai kung vai. Where is she now? Noah asked. Everywhere, Elias said, but mostly here. He tapped his chest. No one asked more. Somehow, they understood. That weekend, Levi helped a neighbor, Mrs. Louisa, carry groceries from her car. Elias hadn't asked her to. He watched from the front porch, a mug cooling in his hand. She said, I have helper hands, Levi told him later. You do. Did I get that from you? Maybe. Or maybe you had them all along. That night, Elias found Theo standing on a stool in the hallway, holding a screwdriver and examining a wall sconce that flickered. You're going to fall, Elias warned. Theo didn't flinch. It's the contact point. Loose wire. Elias stepped closer. You could have told me. You don't like being told what to fix, Theo said, without judgment, just a fact. Elias stared at him for a moment, then stepped forward and held the stool steady. Tell me next time anyway, he said. Theo nodded. After tucking them in, Elias sat by the window in the hallway. Rain tapped on the panes again. The garden glistened in the moonlight. He heard soft steps. Noah appeared in his pajamas, rubbing one eye. You should be asleep. I will be. Just... Elias waited. What if someone comes for us one day? The boy asked, voice small. What if we had someone else before? Elias exhaled slowly. If that day ever comes, we'll face it together, he said. But no one gets to take away what we have now, not even the past. Noah stepped forward and hugged him. And in that moment, Elias knew. He wasn't teaching them how to be children. He was learning how to be a father. The sky was a clean stretch of blue, cloudless and bright. A warm breeze stirred the grass around the picnic blanket, and birdsong echoed from the edge of the woods. Laughter rolled across the field, light, unburdened. Noah was the one telling the story, his arms flailing for effect, as Levi giggled and Theo smirked despite himself. Elias watched from a few feet away, a sandwich half forgotten in his hand. His eyes were soft. Helen had packed the food, and the forest hummed in the distance like a quiet blessing. Then Noah went quiet. Mid-sentence, he stopped. His hands trembled, his face drained of color. Noah! Elias was already rising. The boy blinked, swayed, and collapsed. Noah! Levi's scream split the peace. Theo knelt instantly, patting his brother's cheek. Noah, hey! Wake up! Come on! But he didn't. Elias didn't think. He swept Noah into his arms, blankets and all, and ran. No calls, no driver, no seatbelt, just gravel flying under tires as he gripped the wheel and whispered, Hold on, kid. Just hold on. The emergency room was loud, fluorescent, too bright. A nurse tried to take Noah from him at the desk. Elias resisted for a second too long. He's burning, Elias murmured. He's never burned like this before. Sir, we'll take care of him. Theo and Levi were at his sides, silent now, clinging to each other. Dr. Ramos, the pediatric liver specialist, appeared an hour later with a calm expression that Elias immediately distrusted. We ran a full panel, Ramos said, leading Elias into a side room. It's serious. Acute liver failure. Likely congenital. We need to prepare for a transplant. Elias nodded. Use mine. We'll test you first, Ramos replied, and his siblings, if they're willing. They're willing. Good. Then a pause. Just to confirm, Ramos said gently, you're the biological father. Elias looked at him. The air felt like glass, fragile, reflective. No, he said, but they're my children. Ramos didn't flinch. Understood. We'll proceed with screening." They waited. Hours blurred into shifts. Helen brought food, but no one ate. Theo sat stiff in the waiting room chair. Levi leaned against Elias's arm, quiet. No one asked the obvious question, not yet. The results came that evening. Ramos stepped into the room with a folder and an apologetic tilt to his voice. "None of you are matches." Levi lifted her head. "What do you mean?" Ramos hesitated. "I mean, your blood types don't align. You're not compatible donors." Theo sat up straighter. "That's not possible." "It is," Ilias said softly. The children turned to him. His voice had never sounded so old. "I'm not your biological father," he said. "Any of you." Silence. Levi blinked. "But—" Theo's mouth opened, then closed. Ilias stood slowly, his hands clenched. "I was going to tell you, I just never found the right moment." "You waited 11 years, Theo said, not angry, just stating the weight of it. Ilias met his eyes. "I understand how that sounds." Noah, unconscious in the ICU, separated from them by glass and machines, was the only one not there to hear it. Levi's voice cracked. "So, who are we?" "You're my children," Elias said. "You always have been. But I promise, I'll tell you everything. Just not now. Let's get Noah through this first." They didn't nod, but they didn't walk away. 3 days passed before they found a donor, a woman in a neighboring state, anonymous but healthy. A match. The surgery was scheduled immediately. Elias stood in the surgical prep room while nurses fitted Noah with lines and tubes. Noah stirred, groggy. "Is it time?" "Soon." Noah's hand searched blindly, found Elias's. "Dad, I'm here." "You scared?" Elias swallowed. "I've never been more scared in my life." Noah nodded. "Me too." A pause. "Did you mean it?" the boy whispered. "That you're not my real dad?" Elias leaned closer, brushing hair from his forehead. "I meant I didn't make you," he said. "But I chose you, every single day since the moment I found you, and I'd do it all again." Noah didn't smile, but his fingers gripped tighter. While Noah was in surgery, Elias stepped outside to call Morton. The old man answered on the third ring. "Grant?" "I told them." A beat. "How'd it go?" "They didn't say much, but they stayed." Morton grunted. "Then you did all right." "I don't know how to fix what I broke." "You didn't break it. You just made it complicated. Life's like that." Elias looked at the sky, blank and colorless. "Do you think I was wrong?" "I think you were afraid. But you loved him anyway. That counts." Noah's surgery lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Ramos approached, pulling down his mask. "It went well," he said. "He's stable." Elias sat down for the first time in what felt like years. That night, he watched Noah sleep. Machines beeped in quiet rhythm. Behind him, Theo and Levi stood in the doorway, uncertain. Elias turned to them. "You're still angry?" Theo shrugged. "I'm not sure what I am." "That's fair. I just wish I'd known." "I know." Levi took a step forward. "Does it change anything for you?" Elias shook his head. "Not one thing." She nodded. "Then I think I can wait." Theo said nothing, but he came inside and sat down beside Noah's bed. For now, it was enough. The fire crackled in the hearth, its glow painting the living room in shades of amber and shadow. Outside, the wind pressed gently against the windows, like it too was waiting. The room held its breath. Elias sat in his old armchair, his elbows resting on his knees, fingers woven tight. Across from him, the children, no longer quite children, sat in a line on the sofa, knees brushing, backs straight. The flicker of flame caught in their eyes, but none of them looked away. Helen had brought in a tray of tea, and left without a word. Her part in this had already been played. Now the stage belonged to Elias. He opened a small wooden box that had sat untouched on the mantel for years. It creaked as he placed it on the coffee table between them. Inside, a weathered piece of cloth, a cracked plastic hair clip, and a folded piece of paper, browned at the edges. Elias let the silence stretch for a beat longer, then began. "I found you in the forest," he said. His voice was low, rough. 11 years ago. It was raining. I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just walking. He unfolded the paper and handed it to Theo, who took it with hesitant fingers. Theo passed it to Levi. She read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Clara. I ran from their father. He wanted to sell them. I ran, but I couldn't get far. If you find them, please, do what I couldn't. Please love them." The room didn't move, only the fire. Elias's eyes stayed on the floor. She was already gone when I found her. You were sitting beside her, soaked, cold, silent. You didn't cry. Not anymore. He paused. "I could have called the police. I could have taken you to a shelter, but I didn't. I brought you here." Theo leaned back, arms crossed. "Why?" Elias looked up. "Because I couldn't walk away." He pointed to the cloth. "That was yours, Noah. You were wrapped in it like it was armor. This clip. Levi wore it in her hair. It was cracked even then. Theo, you didn't say a word. Just held the others, like the world might take them." Levi picked up the clip and held it in her palm, like something ancient. "You kept all this." "Every day," Elias said. "I kept everything I could." There was a long beat, the kind of silence only truth could make. "I was scared," Elias admitted. "I didn't know how to be a father. I wasn't even sure I was worthy to try. Violet, my wife, she always wanted children. She used to say the trees would teach them better than we ever could." He reached for the fire, adjusting a log. Sparks leapt and fell. "I tried to raise you the way she would have, quietly, carefully, through small things." Theo's voice broke in. "If you hadn't found us, would we have died?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He stared into the fire, then said, "I don't know." "Maybe." Theo's jaw tightened. "So we owe you everything?" Elias shook his head. "Number. That's not why I did it. I didn't save you to be owed." Levi looked down at the letter again. "She was trying to protect us, even at the end." "She did," Elias said. "She got you far enough. I just finished the path she started." Noah had stayed silent. He sat closest to the fire, his knees drawn up, gaze fixed on the box. Then, softly, "Why didn't you tell us before?" Elias looked at him. "Because I was afraid the truth might undo everything love had built." "But it didn't," Noah said. "No," Elias agreed. "It didn't." Theo leaned forward, staring into the flames. "You know we'll want to find her. Clara. Or anything left of her." "I know. We should have been told." "You're right." Levi leaned her head on Theo's shoulder, eyes damp, but calm. Does it change anything for you?" she asked. Elias smiled, small but certain. "Not one thing." A long moment passed. Then Levi said, "I think we should go see where you found us." Elias blinked. "I want to stand in the place where everything started," she said. Theo nodded. "Me too." Noah looked up. "Can we?" Elias reached for the letter and folded it with care, placing it back in the box. "If you're ready," he said, "I'll take you there." The fire popped. Wind brushed against the glass. Outside, the woods waited. Quiet, steady, eternal. Inside, 4 people sat closer than they ever had before, not by blood, not by history, but by the thread of a choice made under rain years ago. It was time to walk back into the forest, together. Morning arrived quiet and cool, the sky washed in soft grey. Light bled slowly into the corners of the old house, brushing along wood floors and empty staircases. Everything was still. Elias woke to the silence first. Not the usual kind, but a deeper absence, a stillness that settled too easily. He sat up slowly, his hand brushing the empty space on the bench by the window. The mug he'd left for Noah the night before was untouched, cold. Downstairs, the house remained in order. No overturned chairs, no mess. Just a folded blanket on the couch, a used teacup in the sink, and on the kitchen table, a single sheet of paper, folded once, laid beside a small compass. Elias picked it up with both hands. His eyes traced the words, written in a rounded, imperfect scrawl. "Dad, we're not leaving because we're sad. We just need to know who Mum is. We'll come back, I promise. Noah." He didn't move for a long time. Through the window, the garden swayed in the wind. The mist hung low over the treetops. He rested the note back on the table beside the compass and sat in the chair nearest the door. Helen found him there 20 minutes later. "Sir?" she asked gently, stepping into the room. "They've gone." She glanced at the open front door, then back at him. "Where?" "They didn't say. But I think, to find Clara." Helen stepped closer, then pulled out the chair opposite him. "They're old enough to go," Elias said, mostly to himself. "But it doesn't make the house less empty." Helen nodded. "Did you try to stop them?" He looked at her. "Would you have?" She smiled faintly. "No." The night before, in the old reading room, the children had gathered with a flashlight and a borrowed atlas. Levi sat cross-legged on the rug, her fingers tracing the inked names of towns they'd never visited. Theo held the cracked photo of their mother they'd found wedged between pages in Violet's journal. Just a corner of a smile, one eye, a glint of hair. But it was hers. "There," Levi said, pointing. "St. Hallow Shelter? That's where the note said she went." Theo folded the map carefully. "We'll start there." Noah leaned his chin on his knees. "Do you think she'll be something we recognize?" Levi didn't answer. Theo did. "I think we're not looking for a person, just a shape she left behind." Before dawn, they packed quietly, backpacks slung over narrow shoulders, jackets zipped to the throat. Levi slipped the old hair clip into her coat pocket. Theo carried the photo. Noah clutched the compass. Elias's compass, once polished brass, now dulled with time and fingerprints. They didn't go out the front. They slipped through the garden gate, the one that led toward the road. In the present, Elias stood at the window, mug in hand. He hadn't brewed new coffee, just warmed the old one again. The taste was off, but he drank anyway. Helen returned mid-morning, carrying groceries. She placed them wordlessly in the kitchen, but paused when she saw Elias still at the window. "You're not going after them?" she asked. He shook his head. "I told them they could go. They're 13. They're not children anymore. Not entirely." Helen set the bag down. "They'll find pieces. Maybe names. Maybe grief. Are you ready for that?" "I'm not," Elias admitted. "But I owe it to them. To Clara." Upstairs, he opened the door to Levi's room. The bed was made. A sweater hung neatly over the chair. On the desk sat a drawing. 3 figures, hand in hand, standing beneath a tree. One wore a scarf. Another had glasses. The third held a paper flower. He folded the paper and slipped it into his breast pocket. That afternoon, Marcus called. "Elias," the voice crackled through the speaker. "The board's voting on your reinstatement this Friday. I need to know your answer." Elias didn't sit. He walked slowly to the front porch, where the air felt cleaner. older. No. There was a pause. Is that it? I've spent years building something I thought mattered, but what matters is gone right now, and I'm staying here until they come back. They? My children. Another pause. Then, good luck, Elias. He ended the call. As dusk approached, Elias lit the fire in the living room, not because he was cold, but because the quiet needed company. He sat in Violet's old chair, the one she used to lean into, curling her legs beneath her. The cushion still sagged in the same place. Across from him, 3 cups rested on the coffee table. Still waiting. He stared at the flickering flame and whispered, "They'll come home." The room didn't answer, but for the first time, the emptiness didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like waiting. The sky hung low over St. Hallo. Clouds moved slow, like heavy thoughts drifting through a forgotten town. Rain didn't fall, but the streets glistened as if it had just left. Theo stood in front of the faded sign that read, "St. Hallo Shelter for Women and Children." The building was brick, weary and chipped, its corners softened by time. A wire fence ran along the side, overgrown with ivy, and a bell above the door looked like it hadn't rung in years. Levi knocked twice. The door creaked open. An older woman in a faded blue cardigan peered out. Her hair was white, tied back in a neat knot. Her eyes sharp despite age. "Yes?" "We're looking for someone," Levi said, clutching the folded letter. "Clara. She stayed here 11 years ago." The woman paused. Her gaze settled on Levi, then on Noah beside her, his face tucked under his hood, Elias's compass still in his hand. "I'm Estelle," she said softly. "Wait here." They waited on the front steps. Theo didn't sit. He kept glancing at the side gate, at the cracked sidewalk beyond it. When Estelle returned, she wasn't alone. She held a thick binder in her hands and a box wrapped in cloth. "She wasn't here long," she said. "Winter of that year. Just 2 months. She didn't use her real name, said she couldn't." She handed Levi the binder. Inside was a faded intake form. C. Turner. No photo. Just a scrawled note. 3 children. Escape from domestic violence. High risk. She worked in the kitchen, Estelle continued. Refused help for herself. Always asked if we had extra diapers. Never ate until the kids were fed. Barely spoke. But one night, she cried in the hallway outside the nursery. Theo looked up. Why? Because she was trying to leave before someone could find her. Estelle's voice tightened. She left in the rain, with all 3, said she'd rather die than let them fall into his hands. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Estelle pushed the box toward them. This was hers. She left it behind. Inside were scraps of cloth, a child's mitten, and a handwritten list. Rice, matches, baby socks, water tablets, blanket. Levi reached in and pulled out a pink fabric square. "This," she whispered, "was my blanket." From there, they found the library. Levi had traced Clara's name on an old volunteer sign-in sheet in Estelle's binder, book sorting, Clara T. Behind the circulation desk stood a man with a salt and pepper beard and thin spectacles. "Clara?" he said, frowning. "Yes." Quiet woman. Polite. Borrowed books on childbirth, child nutrition, even a book on how to sew by hand. "Did she ever say why?" Theo asked. The man shrugged. "I asked once. She said, 'Not everyone gets to have help when life begins.'" He handed them a torn library card. No number, just a name written in faded pen. Noah clutched it, like it might fall apart. A few blocks over, they found a corner shop called Mildred's. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. Behind the counter was a woman with curly grey hair, half-lensed glasses resting on her nose. Levi placed the pink fabric square on the counter. Mildred blinked. "Where did you get that?" "It was our mother's." The woman came around the counter slowly, reached out, and touched the fabric. "She came here sometimes, asked for scraps, just the smallest pieces. Said she was making a patchwork blanket for her babies." "She made one," Noah said. "It was mine. I still have it." "She cried the last time she was here," Mildred whispered. "Said she didn't think she'd get far, but she had to try. She was trembling. But her voice—" Mildred shook her head, tears behind her eyes. Her voice was steady. Theo said, "She left through the woods." Mildred nodded. "Carried all three in a canvas sack strapped across her back and chest. I offered her a ride. She refused." Late that afternoon they found her, an old neighborhood 2 towns over. They wandered with tired feet until they saw a house with chipped shutters and a woman tending to roses on a stoop. When Levi asked about Clara, the woman dropped her gloves. She brought them inside, poured warm cider, sat in silence for a long time. "My name's Martha," she said. "Clara lived across from me before everything fell apart. She was good, quiet, always looking over her shoulder." She took the letter from Theo's hand, eyes scanning the trembling words written years ago. "I saw her leave with those babies," Martha said. "Middle of the night, didn't knock, didn't say goodbye." "Why didn't anyone look for her?" Noah asked. Martha's voice caught. "We were afraid. Her husband, he had power, money. He made people disappear. Clara didn't run because she was weak. She ran because she was strong enough to know staying would destroy those kids." She looked at them, one by one. "Mi kak chau che vi thuong kat chau nhu honka ban than ming. Ba ai tung noi, chet kong jang so bang viexje kon ming roi vau te kejok ach." Levi wiped her eyes with her sleeve. No one spoke, but something had shifted. Not closure, not yet, but something closer to knowing. And that, for now, was enough. The forest smelled of wet earth and moss, heavy from the morning rain. Leaves whispered underfoot as the children stepped onto the old path, where the branches above knitted together like quiet witnesses. The sky was grey, low, as if bowed under the weight of what was to come. Theo saw the cabin first, its frame slouched, but standing. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney. As they approached, the door creaked open before they could knock. Morton stood in the doorway, still wrapped in the same worn wool coat from years ago. His beard had grown whiter, but his eyes remained steady. "I knew you'd come back," he said simply. The words landed like a memory. "We found her name," Theo said, "and the people she left behind." Morton nodded. "She left something here too." He stepped aside. The inside of the cabin was the same. A stove, a wooden table, 2 chairs. Above the hearth hung a lantern. Beneath it, resting carefully on a shelf, was a glass jar filled with pressed wildflowers, faded but whole. "Follow me," Morton said. He took a lantern down, lit it with a practiced flick, and stepped out into the woods. They didn't speak. The path wound past the place where the forest thickened, where roots broke the soil like old bones. The air felt closer here, more aware. After a few minutes, Morton slowed, then stopped. The clearing was small. A single gravestone stood near the base of an old tree. The bark was silvered, split down the middle. Moss crept along the base. At the foot of the stone was a single white flower, fresh, dew clinging to its petals. "She's here," Morton said. "Clara." Levi stepped forward first. She knelt slowly, as if afraid the moment might break. Her fingers brushed the name carved into the stone, Clara Turner, a mother who ran toward love. Morton spoke gently. "Elias buried her. He didn't call anyone, just came to me, said, 'She needs a place, somewhere quiet, somewhere kind.'" Theo's voice was quiet. "He never told us that." Morton turned to him. He never wanted you to carry it. Grief has a way of hiding behind silence. Noah crouched beside Levi, placing his hand gently on the dirt. His fingers sank into the damp soil, and he whispered, "Mum, I helped him bury her the next day. He didn't cry, but something in him cracked. That crack became you." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, of rain in the leaves, of breath in throats. Morton looked toward the tree above the grave. "You know." Violet, his wife, once told me that if she ever had children, she'd raise them like trees, rooted deep, bending with storms. She never got the chance, but Elias remembered. Theo stood slowly. "He raised us with what she left behind." Morton nodded. "And in doing that, you raised him." Levi reached into her coat pocket and unfolded the old letter. The paper was soft with age, corners frayed. She placed it at the base of the stone, tucking it beneath the flower. She didn't say much, just, "Mum left us behind. But someone took us." Morton stepped back, giving them space. Theo pulled a worn photo from his bag, just the corner of a woman's smile, clipped from a book. He placed it beside the letter. Noah leaned his head gently against the gravestone, lips moving in a whisper only the earth could hear. They didn't cry loudly. There were no sobs, no shouted apologies. Just breathe. Just presence. The forest watched in silence, as if recognizing the reunion of what was lost and what endured. After a long while, Morton cleared his throat. "You can stay a while longer if you'd like. I'll head back." "Thank you," Levi said, her voice steady but soft. He gave them a nod and turned, the lantern swaying in his hand as he disappeared between the trees. The sky opened then, just a little. A sliver of pale sunlight touched the edge of the stone. Theo sat on the ground, knees pulled close. "I used to wonder why we were left." Levi said, "We weren't left. We were led." Noah looked up. "Do you think she would have liked him? Elias?" Levi smiled, small but certain. "She trusted the world with us, and the world gave us him." The three of them sat there, quiet, rooted, and above them the wind stirred the leaves like a mother's hand, brushing over her children. Gentle, unseen, eternal. The rain had passed, but the windows still held its breath. Drops clung to the glass like thoughts left unspoken. The air outside smelled of clean stone, pine needles, and something else. Something softer, like memory. Inside the house, Elias was in the kitchen. The kettle had just begun to whistle, a low, patient sound. He moved slowly, not from age, but from weight, an invisible one that had settled across his shoulders for 11 years. He poured hot water into the teapot, let it steep. Set out 4 cups on the table, though his hands only knew the rhythm for one. He didn't turn when the door opened. He didn't need to. The sound was enough, the creak of the hinges, the shuffle of wet shoes on the threshold, a breath drawn, like someone crossing back into a world they weren't sure they could return to. Helen had opened the door before they could knock. She stood aside with no words, only a slight nod. She hadn't asked questions when they left. She wouldn't ask them now. Theo stepped in first, taller than when he had left, or maybe just standing straighter. Levi followed, her fingers still damp from the graveyard earth. Noah entered last, holding nothing but the compass, and then, with a small motion, set it gently on the edge of the table beside the cups. Elias's back remained turned for a beat longer. Then, quietly, he said, "I kept the water warm." Theo took a step closer, then another, until his chest pressed lightly against Elias's shoulder. Levi reached for his hand. Noah didn't say anything at first. He just wrapped his arms around Elias's waist from behind, burying his face, into the folds of the sweater, and then, as if all their voices were waiting for him, Noah whispered, "We left." And we understood. Our biological mother gave us life, but Dad taught us how to live. The teapot steamed. The room stayed still. Elias turned at last. He didn't speak. His arms moved slowly, gathering them into an embrace that barely held the shape of itself at first, then tightened as though it had always known this was the moment it was made for. His voice was rough when it came. "I didn't know if I should hope." Theo leaned in. "You didn't stop us." "I couldn't," Elias replied. "Some things you have to find for yourself." Levi stepped back just enough to reach into her coat pocket. She pulled out a folded photo, weathered, damp at the edges, and set it gently on the table beside the compass. It was a picture of Clara's grave, soft sunlight brushing the edge of the stone. "She was brave," Levi said, "but she was also scared and alone." Theo added, "She made the first choice, but you carried it." Elias's eyes didn't leave the photo. His fingers brushed the edge. "She was your beginning," he said, "but I was lucky enough to watch you become." They sat together after that, not quite talking, not quite silent. Helen returned with blankets, no words still, just gestures. A kettle refilled, 4 cups poured. The room smelled of bergamot and lemon peel. Noah curled up beside Elias on the couch. Theo knelt near the fireplace, lighting it with practiced hands. Levi stood for a long moment in front of the family photo shelf. Then she reached into her backpack and added one more. A new photo, 3 children at a gravestone, standing hand in hand. She placed it beside Violet's wedding portrait. Elias saw. He didn't speak, just nodded, slowly, once. Theo joined her. 2 mothers, 1 father, 1 family. Outside, the sky began to clear in full. The last drops slipped from the eaves, pattering into the soil like a rhythm, finally resolving. Inside, Elias leaned back into the chair by the fire. It had once belonged to Violet. Then for years it belonged to no one. And now, it belonged to all of them. Noah yawned into his shoulder. "Are you going to sleep here?" "Maybe," Elias said. "Can we stay too?" He smiled. "That's all I've ever wanted." No one needed to say it, but it hung in the air nonetheless. They had gone far to find where they came from. But home had been waiting at the door all along. The forest was quiet again. Morning mist hung in loose threads between the trunks, where light filtered through like soft breath. Dew clung to the edges of ferns, and the path was dappled with shadow and the memory of rain. In the sitting room, Elias was adjusting his glasses, a thin notebook in his lap. The fire was low, barely embers now, but the warmth lingered. Theo sat cross-legged on the rug, fiddling with a snapped twig he'd brought in from the garden. Levi leaned her chin on the arm of the couch, eyes expectant. Noah, half wrapped in a throw blanket, curled beside Elias, with his cheek pressed to the old man's shoulder. Elias cleared his throat, fingers gently flipping through pages. The notebook was Violet's. There were ink stains in the margins, smudges of earth, and one page written in her hand, then crossed out, then rewritten again. At the top, the tree that thought it couldn't bloom. "I don't know if I'll tell this right," Elias said. "You will," Levi said. "You already are," Theo added. Elias glanced at them, then began. "There once was an old tree. It lived at the edge of a clearing, beside a stream that never sang too loud. It had stood there for so long that even the birds forgot how young it used to be. For many years, it tried to grow flowers. It saw the younger trees bloom, bright colors, soft petals, but it never could." Noah blinked slowly. "Why?" "No one knew," Elias continued. Maybe the soil wasn't right. Maybe the light didn't fall just so. Or maybe it just believed too strongly that blooming was something other trees did, not it. He turned the page. His voice steadied. But one spring, after many winters, 3 seeds fell near its roots. No one saw who dropped them. The wind? A bird? Maybe they rolled down from somewhere high. But the old tree did what it knew best. It gave them shade. Its roots made room. It bent a little to catch the rain just right. And? Levi asked, already smiling. They grew, Elias said softly. Not all at once. One was careful, one was wild, one was slow and unsure, but all 3 reached toward the sky. And one morning, when no one was watching, the old tree bloomed. Not loudly, just enough, 3 blossoms, small but certain. Silence followed, but not the hard kind, the kind that filled the room like a held breath, like the soft moment between inhale and exhale. Did the tree know it was blooming? Noah asked. Elias shut the notebook gently. It didn't need to. Helen entered then, carrying a folded scarf. Violets, unfinished, still threaded through knitting needles. She handed it to Levi. She started this for someone she thought she'd never meet, Helen said. Now, I think it belongs to you. Levi traced the stitches with her finger, then nodded. Theo stood and moved to the window. Outside, the forest was waking. Sunlight flickered on the leaves. Can we go out? He asked. Just walk, like she would have. Elias stood. Put on your shoes. They didn't take a path this time. They made their own, over wet grass, through low shrubs, past trees that had watched them grow without ever saying a word. Noah picked up smooth stones and placed them in a trail behind them. So, we don't forget the way back, he said. Theo paused at a birch tree and began carving something into the bark. A single letter. V. Levi picked a maple leaf, still turning gold at the tips. She slipped it into Violet's notebook, then tucked the book under her arm. Elias walked behind them, not to lead, just to follow, to be part of the shape they made in the world. They reached the clearing by the old tree, its bark split, the moss thick near its roots. No one spoke for a while. Theo sat down first, pressing his palms into the soil. Levi lay on her back, staring up through the canopy. Noah pressed his cheek to Elias's arm. Do you think she sees us? He asked. Elias didn't answer with words. He simply looked up at the way the light filtered through the branches. They stayed there as long as the sun allowed, and when it was time to return, they left no trail. Because this time, they didn't need one. They knew the way, and the forest at last felt like it knew them too.